Let's get into the weekend outlook today. We're going to be diving into Bitcoin and some of the big tokens and whether or not they'll be making a move over this holiday weekend. You guys don't want to miss it. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to TechPath. Joining me, of course, is Mr. Evan Aldo. Great to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
I do want to thank our sponsor, though, and that is Tangem. If you guys are looking at going into self-custody, this is one of the best places to go. And the reason is the ease and also the security of the Tangem ecosystem. Both the card and the app works fantastic. Go over to tangem.com. You guys can, of course, learn a lot more about getting into self-custody over there, but it's super easy and very simple to do. They also have this new stealth wallet that's coming in September, but right now, if you want to get it, go ahead and hit that Get Tangem button, get the 3-card set. It'll, of course, set you up for a good backup and get rolling. So make sure and use our link down below. All right, so I want to get into it today. Before I do that, I want you guys to do something for me. Very special. I want you to go over to Evan's channel. We're showing it right now. Go to Evan Aldo. It's at Evan Aldo on YouTube.
Yep. And
there, all we got to do is get him to 15K. He's going to drop some more super secret videos this weekend. I'm going to put him on the spot and get out there. So check it out. He does a really good job over there on his analysis. All right, Evan, let's get into a couple of things today.
Yep.
One I want to hit on is, of course, what's happening here. July PCE inflation. Fed's preferred inflation measure was 2.5, below expectations at 2.6. So that's still trending down, which is good. Core PCE was 2.6, below the 2.7. So both headline and core seem to be flat compared to June. You look at this, if we continue down this track, the quarter point's going to happen in September.
Yep.
Do you think that's going to have an impact?
Quarter point probably won't help us too much, especially for, I don't think that's enough liquidity to really give a crazy altcoin season, but 50 points, once we get there, come November, that's when, and that's how the 4-year cycle works too, the end of that year, every 4 years, that's where the altcoins really start to go crazy. So,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I want to go over to a clip real quick because this is talking about whether or not we got a soft landing. Let's take a look.
I want to get your take on today's PCE data and whether it signals to you that we've mission accomplished on inflation.
This was a good report, right on track with what markets were expecting. This will put the Fed squarely on rate cut in September. And I think it's going to be 25 basis points. And I think the debate now will shift out to the November-December meeting. And I think the baseline there is 25 basis points at each of those meetings as well. And it is a soft landing, and I think it has been achieved. I think Jay Powell's speech at Jackson Hole was essentially recapping the success of monetary policy over the last 2 years.
So soft landing, it sounds like you're still expecting a gradual cutting of rates, 25 basis points, maybe some debate thereafter. What are you looking for in next week's payrolls report that could change that dynamic for you?
Yeah, I think this is, I think the debate, because of Jackson Hole, I think the debate's shifting. So now if you got a surprise in any of the upcoming reports, I don't think it would affect September. It would affect the debate about what to do later this year and focus on November.
All right, so a couple of things he hit on there. I think the two elements is that the 25 probably is done for September. The November-December potential 25 rate cuts, that's going to get us to a 0.75. Just on the conservative, if we get a stronger position, in other words, maybe inflation continues to come down and jobs are a little stiff, do you think we could see maybe a full point by the end of the year?
I think it's kind of 50-50 on that. That's hard to say. It really depends kind of how Powell's feeling the mood there. I think unemployment has to continue forward, and I think S&P 500 probably should not make new all-time highs.
Right, yeah.
You know, you'd probably have to see stagnant for that. But I think a safe bet would be at least 25 basis points each meeting going forward.
Yeah, so that would be three cuts by the end of the year, which would be a significant shift in the market. Could see a big bounce. I want to take a look at Bitcoin, still underperforming stock since early August. And you look at this as a potential deleveraging event. Could it be the case? A couple of points that were in this article. This was on Monday the 4th. Market shed approximately 367 billion. That was a pretty big hit that we saw on that sell-off. Broader decline in equities, one of the worst days on risk assets since Black Monday. So everybody was kind of pushing at it. And also, if you think about the lack of narrative on Bitcoin, even though I feel like Bitcoin has a good solid narrative in the political front, just in the sense that we might get a candidate that is pro Bitcoin. Bitcoin price is now struggling to recover since the 4th. So again, they're claiming lack of narrative. If you're trading Bitcoin right now, are you trading it down? Are you shorting this?
You have to be very objective. I mean, when I look at the market right now, we see we keep making lower highs right here, 1, 2, 3, and it looks like we're about to be 4th. And what I also did out here, this is on our 3-day chart. If you look at this time, so you had the red dot here, the red X, you can see that was about a 14% drop. Really to all the way down, that was a 22% drop, but you had some relief in a little bit there. Last time that happened was around January, and that was that same area. And if we do this here, that was about just under a 10% correction there. So if we do that same situation here, it would be around, that 10% would be right around 53. The same thing, you can see it a little bit better on the 2-day as well. The same yellow, the same situation there. It's a little bit higher there. That was a 12%. So from this point, let's see what 12% brings us to. 12% is a little bit, 52. If you come down, I mean, the big place right here is going to be 51, that 50K area. So we might, into that first meeting, potentially into September, this is where the first FOMC meeting is, September 17th, we may come down to around 51. And the thing that if you look here in the 3-day, I mean, on market cipher B here, this is just textbook bearishness, and this is the reason you have to be a little bit more bearish here, because you got money flow coming down and your VWAP is coming down as well. That's a more rare bearish sign. That doesn't mean it's going to be extremely catastrophic, but that means you got a good shot of coming back down to that 51K area. And the place that we got to hold, and so far we're holding it, so I guess there is a chance for the bulls, is this area right here, spiraling right around 58K. So if we can hold that, we might be okay. If we look at some lower time frames here, you're kind of starting to bounce off of it a little bit right now, which could be good. I don't know if I like some of these time frames too much. I mean, your hourly looks good. We're coming into the weekend, though. It could be kind of tough. So we'll see if we could kind of hold this area. We really need to hold this area. But when I look at those larger time frames, not too good for holding this area. We definitely could come down to 51K here.
So a lot of movement on Bitcoin right now. You look at sentiment, still a little soft on Bitcoin, even though money's coming back in just a little bit. But when we look at the MSI, which is our market sentiment indicator, you guys can pick this up actually by just going over to our website and joining the community over there. You can get in our pro level where you get the indicator on TradingView. But sentiment continues to push down on Bitcoin.
Yep.
So if that is holding through September and we get something that pushes on the quarter, do you feel like it would be a prior or a post the rate cut?
So rate cut is always a lot of volatility. I think if we're bearish into the rate cut, it'll at least temporarily bring us up. And then, I mean, if you look at my chart, here's one thing some people have been talking about. Coming down into the rate cut, getting a nice spike up, and then one last wing down right here to maybe 47, really scare off a lot of people. And then as you come into November, you come into the election, we'll see who wins, but if it's a very pro-crypto candidate, that probably would bring things up, along with a second rate cut for a really good run-up. And that's when I think with confidence that Bitcoin will bottom out against the S&P 500. I think we need 2 rate cuts to really see that.
Well, remember, we had a huge Thanksgiving weekend last year. That was a big November run, and now granted it's going to be post-election by then. So some interesting points for sure. I want to jump over to Ethereum for a second. So Vitalik, he's moving a little bit of ETH, 800 to be exact, to a multi-sig wallet. So is there a potential sell-off coming in from him? I know he moves ETH back and forth. It's not necessarily a big deal, but if you look at Ethereum right now and some of the movements that we've seen with ETH, it also aligning still lockstep with Bitcoin. Would you trade this short or would you go long on
right
ETH?
Now, I mean, we're coming into a holiday weekend, which makes it a little bit tougher to trade too. The lower, volatility and lower liquidity is going to make it a little tougher. When I look at ETH though, on some of these shorter time frames, I think most likely, you look at this money flow coming down, like on this 8 hour, it does look like, I mean, I'm in a short position from right around up here, 25.30. You're right where we are right now, we came up a little bit, but I'm looking for this area around 23.75, this pocket right here, which I think is really big, and we might hit it, definitely might hit it. Money flow looks like it wants to keep going down here, not looking too much of a bottom just yet, similar to, maybe we could even repeat something of this nature if you come down a little bit more here, repeat this drop down, and then potentially make a higher low right around this area in a couple weeks or so, jump off of right around 2350. That could be a big area. So overall, it is a little concerning. I mean, your money flow doesn't look good in your higher time frames. And then when you look, let's look at the really low ones right now. Now we're getting some volatility, making another big run up, maybe to scare away some people shorting, but we'll see what happens. I mean, this spider line, we really got to hold this level, 25.57, and then if we could hold this level, then you got a shot at 26.90. We'll see what happens over the weekend. I wouldn't, as of right now, I wouldn't be overly bullish. So I'd be more in the bear camp.
Okay, a little bit in the bear camp. Right now on ETH, also when you look at just sentiment on Ethereum in general, we see this still continuing to point down. And this has been moving downward for a little bit. I think the concern right now, you can kind of see all the red bars right there on our indicator. This, of course, is on the daily. Sentiment has not been positive on Ethereum for quite some time. At some point, it's going to turn around.
Yes.
And we're going to see a boom on ETH. Do you feel that when we see that flip, accelerated market-wise compared to Bitcoin, where do you think that number is? Do you think ETH gets back to a 2K number?
When we jump up, yeah, well, looking at, I'll tell you when I think that'll happen. So when we look at Ethereum versus Bitcoin on this chart, on the 2-week right here, we're getting towards the bottom, I think. I mean, this has been bearish against Bitcoin since August of 22. It's been about 2 years now, and we're down a full 53% against Bitcoin. I think we're getting very close to that bottom area, and I think 2 rate cuts is more than enough to really make this bottom out against Ethereum. So I think you could bleed a little bit, or excuse me, against Bitcoin. I think you could bleed a little bit more against Bitcoin, probably an 11% at the most, getting down to this area in November. And I think that's where you're going to see a big jump up. And if we compare it to 2 areas here, this is one area when the Fed started to cut rates. They cut rates in July of 2019.
Yep.
A few months later, you bottomed out and you went on a nice bull run against Ethereum, against Bitcoin. And then the time before that in the 4-year cycle, December of 2016, basically November, you were bottomed, close to it here. And then look at that. That was that giant run up against Bitcoin. Obviously, it's not going to be 2,000% against Bitcoin, but I think you got a good shot of at least, getting back up to these highs here. And let's see what that percentage is. That'd be around 100% against Bitcoin at least.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So still in the camp right now on Ethereum long-term holding. I think a lot of people that we see here on the channel definitely going long. One of the tokens that has shown a little bit of potential upside, maybe even during this liquidity phase, has been Solana. So some major crypto exchanges teasing Solana liquid staking tokens, and whether or not we see a little bit of takeoff. There's a couple of people that are analyzing this in the sense that we could see a little bit of movement hinting that the launch of a new Solana-based product coming up in Breakpoint could cause a lot of movement. Now remember, Breakpoint's coming up here in September.
Right around the Fed pivot. Yeah.
Likely gonna get a lot of innovation. We could see some news on Fire Dancer. There's a lot that could be going on. So you have to be on the look for that. The other thing that they kind of allude to here, it would allow users to stake more tokens and receive obviously rewards there. Others also shared their excitement around the products, calling them bullish for the Solana ecosystem. These are many of the projects that are launching at Breakpoint. So that being the case, and if you look at Breakpoint right now, coming up on September 2021, this will be post interest rate cut. So could this be a run-up for Solana coming into this?
Well, coming into it, I'm trying to be objective here. The charts don't look at it, but I think it could be more of a post-news type of situation. If we look at the chart here on our 3-day, just like Bitcoin, I mean, you have to be objective here. It's not a bullish pattern. You got money flow coming out. I mean, you had your trigger wave here that we were hoping would do more than just bring us up to 162, and then you're nullifying it and coming down. So it looks like price wants to come down at least a little bit more here. And the problem here where it gets a little bit more bearish is you're losing this big area right around 138, and the next big area is going to be this spiral line, this trend line right around 124 to 122 on the lower side. So I mean, it does look likely that we're going to hit this area and then maybe bounce around here. I mean, there is a lot of liquidity. I know some people who are I'm bullish on Solana too. I really like it, but there's a lot of liquidity right below this low right here. It would not surprise me if they find a way to bring this down. A lot of buyers buy it up right around 100. There's so many orders and right around 100, and then you kind of recover from there. So I do think if Bitcoin goes down to 50K, you got a shot at definitely testing 100
All right,
here.
so we could see a $100 Solana come back in the game. And I think the key here with Solana, again, is going to be breakpoint. It will also be some very key things happening with Bitcoin as a whole, and whether or not we see that shift on liquidity going into altcoins, which could be still Q1 of next year. Is that still your opinion, is that we're Q1 next year for Solana? I mean, for altcoins?
So let's look at Bitcoin dominance to give us an estimate on that. So in terms of altcoins really taking off, if we look at what happened last time in the 4-year cycle, this is where Bitcoin dominance really topped out. It was December 21st of 2020, right around that date, 72% right here. And then look at that. That was where altcoins really just went insane. And what is the catalyst that would potentially recreate that? It's probably the Fed cutting rates. And I think it's going to be more than one rate cut. And if we follow kind of this pattern upward, right around our second rate cut in the beginning of November is where we might top out at 60% for Bitcoin dominance, which is going to be a huge, huge area. So I think most likely November, December is really going to be the point where we see altcoins start to really go upward. I think even if the market keeps bleeding in that situation, I think altcoins will start to outperform Bitcoin at that point,
Right, yeah, I
into most of 2025.
Well, and this is the key when we get into altcoin season. This is the cycles that we often see here within the crypto market. So could actually be a case. If it holds to past cycles, much like, so
I
you
think
feel
it
like,
will.
okay, all right.
Well, I think even not looking at the cycle, you just look at the Fed starting to cut rates and the liquidity coming
it's
in.
It's the macro landscape, I think, that continues to push. Plus, we're going to have, a new president, potentially either way, and we're going to know a little bit more as to what our position is, from a standpoint of lobbying and lawmaking around this. I want to get into two more tokens here, and that is Avalanche and Chainlink, both of which Hashkey Exchange has now added Avalanche and Chainlink for trading pairs for retail investors. This is a big deal in Hong Kong. We actually anticipated this months ago, and it's come to fruition. So I think the opportunity here for AVAX and Link to maybe make a little bit of a run, or at least lead out the altcoins. Do you feel still very strong about AVAX in this run?
Yeah, AVAX I really like. I mean, look, in the next few months into November, it could be a little bit more bearish, but I think in the macro, I mean, let's just look at the macro here. Look at our 2-week, this trigger wave forming. I mean, this is great, but it's a high time frame. It may take some time to play out, and you could easily, come back down to this low before that happens, make a double bottom around $17, and you'd still be bullish in terms of that 2-week. Now, if we look at some of these lower time frames here, it's a little bit different than like Bitcoin or Ethereum, but you're still seeing, like, look at this area right here on Market Cypher B. You got some gap to RSIs and a trigger wave to the downside. Same situation here, which could, let's just see what happened. Let's draw a little trend line. Let's see what happened right here. This was down, I'm not going to count that wick, but this was down a good amount. Now let's see if we recreate that. There could be a lot of liquidity right below that 17 area that we could jump off of right around that first Fed meeting potentially. Looking at the real short term here, I mean, money flow, you're getting some bull divs. Maybe in the real short term you could come up a little bit, but it does look like you're going to at least retest 21 here. We're kind of in that downtrend. We're not hitting off of anything too major yet. I mean, your lower time frames are giving us a little bit of hope, but it's not like enough where I'd want to go long at this moment. And coming into the holiday weekend, it's going to get more unpredictable. I want to see what kind of happens next week to try to look to be hopefully dodging that that bearish bullet and hopefully bouncing off of 21. But yeah, and I mean, this 4-hour, look at this money flow just going right down right there.
Yeah,
not too good. I think you're at least going to retest 21.
Chainlink has been going a little bit sideways. It did have a little bit of a run last week. You look at where its position is right now at about $11. Is this a buy right now?
I think it's a great buy for the macro, but I think hold. I mean, for the macro, you could easily, I mean, just giving like a long-term price prediction right here, we draw a fib level. I mean, I'm looking at, I think you got a good shot at $80 on the highest possible end, maybe 120, maybe even a little bit more than that. I mean, look at past bull runs. Some of these coins go crazy. They could do 10Xs, but in the real short term, we got to be a little bit more objective. I mean, look at this blood diamond here. This brought us down quite a bit. If it repeats that, you could easily come back down, make a higher low, hopefully at like $8.70. If we look at some of our middle time frames, that money flow looks so ugly coming down on that 5-hour right there. If you compare it to the last time we were like this, we came down, I don't think it's going to be this catastrophic, but you could easily, come down to retest this point at just under $10, and I think you could do that, within the next 2 weeks, some point before the Fed pivots.
So be ready for Chainlink. If you're going to scoop some up, that might be the time to do it. All right, we're going to wrap up here on NVIDIA, and I want to take a look at NVIDIA because there's one thing that did happen, and they came in with earnings. Earnings were good. They weren't, well, they beat, but they didn't beat to the level. It's almost like you didn't do well enough. And of course, now 120. This was crazy. 122% revenue growth in the second quarter. This is the slowest pace they had. It was 120%. And of course, you look at the stock. Did not respond well, and it has so much to do with what the top side of the S&P does. How does this maybe position the S&P going into this rate cut?
I think it would be a little bit more. I mean, NVIDIA could, because it's been such a big thing, it could do, underperform the S&P 500. That could slightly go up while NVIDIA goes down. When I look at NVIDIA, though, it looks more bearish. I mean, look at that trigger wave to the downside, similar to Bitcoin in some ways. And I think you're going to, repeat this drop downward back to $95. I don't know if you'd lose that. I think you got a good shot at keeping that. I mean, I went to go to the daily here. The daily coming down, crossing from green to red. I mean, that's the first time we've had that signal, that bearish signal, in a long, long time. When you came into the green here. So most likely you will come down to retest 96. That could be right around that Fed pivot.
That'd be a good buy, I think, on NVIDIA.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I heard Nancy Pelosi got in right around 100.
There you go. All right, guys. Listen, we're going to be doing this, of course, our weekend wrap up. We're going to actually drop a altcoin video for you guys to look at altcoins to hold into 2025. So make sure and check the channel for that. If you're not subscribed, make sure and do that right now. Join our Diamond Circle. It's our private group that has direct access to me. It's very easy to join. Always just hit the link down below. And of course, we'll catch you next time right here on TechBath.